Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Each week, we speak with top influencers, marketers, and brands who share their experiences, strategies, and tactics for influencer marketing in China. Here's your host, Lauren Hallanan.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. I apologize. I am getting this episode out slightly later than I usually do. I try really hard to be consistent and stick to my schedule, but things have been a bit crazy over here. Within the past week or so, my husband accepted a new job down in Westchester, New York, just a little bit north of the city, and this opportunity just appeared suddenly, and it's perfect, and he had to take it. We had been hoping to move down closer to New York City anyway, so it's a good thing. But as I said, it just kind of came out of nowhere. And so I've been crazy trying to find a new place to rent and figure out the whole move. And it's just totally distracted me and gotten me behind on my work. So I think we found a place though, fingers crossed. And we'll still be living outside of the city, but I can take the commuter train in for day trips, which I'm super excited about. It'll be much more convenient to get into the city. So if any of you listening are in New York City or will be visiting New York City, definitely let me know. I would love to meet up with you. Anyway, on to the episode. I'm sure many of you will recognize this week's guest, Matt Brennan. Matt is the co-founder of China Channel, creator of the Chat Conference, and a well-known speaker and expert on all things WeChat. I realized we hadn't really covered WeChat that much so far on the podcast, so I wanted to have Matt on to give us the rundown of everything we need to know. In this episode, we cover how brands and influencers can be using mini programs, WeChat's improved search features, what is the brand zone? Will WeChat start to monetize influencer campaigns like Weibo and Meipai have? How foreign brands and tourism boards can be better utilizing WeChat? And WeChat saturation and how to grow an audience on a mature platform. I really enjoyed talking to Matt. He's so knowledgeable about this platform, and I'm sure that you will learn a lot. Before we start, I just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, ParkLu. ParkLu is China's premier influencer marketing platform. Learn more at parklu.com. Also, I haven't really asked this before, but if you are enjoying the podcast, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a rating and review on iTunes. And now, on to our interview with Matt. Welcome to the China Influencer Marketing Podcast. Really excited to have you here.
Hi, Lauren. Yeah, glad to be on the podcast.
As I was saying before we started the call, I'm pretty sure that most of my listeners know who you are. You're a big name when it comes to WeChat, all things WeChat. But it would be great if you could just give a quick introduction to who you are and what you do, just in case they haven't heard of you.
Sure. So, Matt Brennan, my company is China Channel. You can find us at chinachannel.co. And we do a couple of things. We have a blog that's pretty widely read in this space and put out a lot of content. And then we do a conference once a year in Shanghai. That's also pretty well known in the industry. I think it's probably the largest English language conference for digital marketing in China. We do that like last year. We did two-day conference with lots of workshops, and then 2-day hackathon as well with WeChat mini programs, which I think we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
And I do a lot of speaking and training around the world to help people understand what's going on in China with digital marketing, with WeChat, with Tencent, and the space in this really, really fast evolving landscape in China. And I also do a podcast as well with Tech Nodes, and that's China Tech Talk.
Yeah, I love your podcast. And I'm really hoping that I can make it over to your conference this year. I was so bummed I couldn't make it last year, but I had just moved back to the US and was still figuring things out over here, and I'm going to try really hard because it looks so fun and it looks so interesting, and I was just so bummed I couldn't make it last year.
Yeah, you're more than welcome, and I'm sure any of the listeners want to attend. It's September every year. We haven't set a date this year, but it will be in September, and downtown Shanghai. It's really fun to bring everyone together because we're all dispersed across mainland China and across different parts of the world, and to come together and bring all the experts in one place is special. So a bit stressful for me, but obviously it's worked out so far. 2 years that we've been doing it, and hopefully it'll work out this year as well.
Awesome. So yeah, I want to dive right into a couple things, but I really wanted to have you on the podcast because I was realizing that even though I guess this will be the 17th podcast episode, and we haven't really talked about WeChat that much on the podcast, which seems a little crazy considering that WeChat is a very important part of influencer marketing in China. But I guess that's just how it's worked out with all the guests that I've had on so far. So like you were just mentioning, I really want to talk about mini programs because I think that a lot of people are very confused by them. What exactly are they and how can brands be using them? How do they relate to influencer marketing? It's very confusing for people to wrap their heads around, I think.
Okay, sure. What are mini programs? So mini programs are a sort of light application that live within the WeChat environment, and they're sort of meant to mimic the way that on a phone, I guess why do we use apps? Why don't we really use browser on the web page? On the phone. Opening up a browser and typing in a web address. Not too many people do that, right? You tend to use apps on your phone. Why is that? That's because they're really fast and they're really smooth and they're native to the sort of phone environment. They work much better than a web page does. And so that's what WeChat's trying to recreate here, is a sort of experience for the user that's similar to a native app. But it's much smaller, it's much faster. You don't need to download anything. You don't need to go to an app store. You don't need to update it. You just use it and go. It just appears, and it's like having a native app without all of that trouble. So that's the vision. And the vision for mini programs comes from Alan Jung, who is the founder of the WeChat team. A legendary name in the China tech scene, because him and his team have almost, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say they've single-handedly changed Chinese society a couple of times with the sort of innovations that they've brought out. So there's been a lot of hype around mini programs when they first came out, a lot of very high expectations. And then when that rapidly changed into a lot of disappointment, and a lot of people saying that these things were no good and didn't understand what the WeChat team was trying to achieve with them, and they kind of had some obvious drawbacks. But then over the course of last year, I think certainly around summertime, people started changing their opinion about mini programs, and then by the end of the year, it became obvious that these were actually quite good, and there was some serious momentum building behind this initiative.
Yeah, it definitely took me a while to kind of start using them or to realize what they were, just as a general WeChat user. And I think because, like you said, they're an app, so they can be used in many different ways. But I think that one of the biggest ways that they're making waves is with e-commerce. I think that... Yes. there's a lot of brands and influencers who seem to be transitioning into using mini program stores instead of other WeChat e-commerce options. So why is it that they might want to do that? Like, why would they want to use a mini program instead of some other type of, I guess, HTML5 or other WeChat store? What's the benefit of it?
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Lauren. So for many programs, we can say that a large part of last year was with the new developments and the iterations they were doing on the platform was to sort of build a system where someone like an influencer could easily create a WeChat store, which gives one of their followers almost the same experience that they have when they go to Tmall or Taobao when they want to buy something. And that really wasn't possible using just a web page. Before mini programs came out, when you wanted to buy something on WeChat, there was the experience wasn't as smooth. It wasn't as fast. It wasn't as quick. Customer service wasn't as good as if you went to an influencer's Taobao store where everything's built in and it's in a native app and it's all really smooth and people know how to use it because they've been using Taobao for years and years. And everyone, when they want to buy something, they think of Taobao and they have this expectation of what customer service should be on Taobao and how that process of buying should work. And then WeChat really, it was definitely possible to buy. I'm not saying the experience was bad by any means, but it wasn't as good as Taobao. So mini programs is a leveler here. It means that the experience for a customer to buy on WeChat now can be as smooth as it is on an Alibaba platform. So that's a huge step forward for doing e-commerce on WeChat. And then there was a lot of other issues that, for example, for influencers on WeChat, they all run subscription accounts mostly. And a subscription account is very, very limited in what it can do in terms of from an article. If an influencer puts out a really nice piece of content and they put a lot of effort into it, and then they want to convert from that, usually before mini programs, the only ways you could convert from that was through a QR code or through the read more link. And these are typically got a very low rate of conversion. For a read more link, it might be something like 1%. So that's not good for converting into sales. And many programs change that completely because with that, you can embed a mini program within an article, have a nice big screenshot of the product that you're trying to sell. And when users click through, again, like I said before, it's like a native app-like experience, which is in terms of customer service, in terms of buying, it's one tap to add your phone number, another tap to get your delivery address, which you've already inputted into Jingdong at some point. And so rather, compared to the old way of doing it on WeChat, this is much better, much smoother, and we'll get a much higher level of conversion.
Yeah, do you know, do they have any stats out yet about the conversion as compared to the read more button?
Yeah, there was. I mean, Becky Lee was one of the case studies that the WeChat team put forward. So she's a pretty famous WeChat influencer. I can't remember off the top of my head. You have to put it in the show notes, maybe, what
Sure.
the conversion was. It was significantly higher than what she was doing before.
Yeah, I
think
I saw that case study floating around, so I'll try and find it and link it in. And as far as setting up a mini program store, whether it's like a brand or an influencer, is it difficult? I've heard that it's a little bit more like they have. I don't know. Is it difficult to set one up? I'm not a programmer, but I've heard that mini programs are a little bit.
No, well, it's the format's evolving still quite rapidly, and I think the product roadmap has got a long way to go. But it used to be, I think when they opened up, it was probably a little bit difficult. But now there's so many third-party tools. You can use things like Youzan. Youzan has a full, mini program solution that requires virtually no coding or technical knowledge. You can open up a WeChat store. Like, actually, there's an option within there to build a very admittedly a very simple mini program, just through the basic back end. And yeah, you don't need to even if you want to find a developer and build something very beautiful and personalized, or like be a little bit ambitious and try and convert some of the features and functionality of your app and integrate them into a mini program. The actual platform itself, one of the key advantages of mini programs is it's so fast to develop them, and you only need to develop them once. So building a mini program is many times cheaper and faster than building native apps. And so that's why we've seen. Yeah, so this is, I got a friend, you probably know them, the Wagon Tierbold, who is a coding school in Shanghai. And those guys have been pushing mini programs heavily because, they teach people how to code. That's how they make their money. And then they said, well, in China, for learning how to code, mini programs is the best. It's the easiest platform. It's the fastest platform to code on and build things that are, that work natively within WeChat really, really fast. And so they can actually build apps within days with small teams on the mini programs framework. Whereas if you're doing that for Android and iOS, you'd be looking at weeks or months.
Oh wow! I really didn't know that. I thought it was a little bit difficult to build a mini program. So that's new information for me. Really interesting. So are there any? It doesn't have to do with necessarily influencers, but are there any mini program kind of any cool things that you see brands doing there that really stand out to you? You just think that it's an amazing use case.
Oh, good question. Let me think. So I think, as we just touched upon, most brands are using these. They're sort of exploring the potential of the platform. I don't think we've seen any like major standout case studies from sort of foreign brands. I mean, Starbucks was one of the early adopters, but they're just using it as a sort of standard gifting card feature. And for a lot of chain stores, that's a really nice use case because, it's e-commerce, it's fast conversion, and you can set it up and it doesn't, because it's just gifting cards, it's kind of separate from all your other systems. So you don't need to worry about integration with all the heavy stuff that you've already built. So we see a lot of brands do that. I would say there's a lot of brands using it for like video and stuff. I think there's a really nice Nike mini program where they're using it instructional video for fitness, because things like maps and videos work really, really fast with mini programs. Because what a mini program does is it sort of takes the content and you have to go through an application process, but once you've done that, your content is actually hosted on Tencent servers, so it's super fast. So things like video content work really well. So there's a lot of people doing content-based mini programs as well. But I don't think there's any sort of like major like that's one of the things that confuses people. They're like, what can this do that's new? It's not so much about doing new flashy things. It's about taking what we already do with apps and making it much easier to do within WeChat. So a lot of companies are looking at just making a light version of their app and then making that into a mini program.
Okay, gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely does. I'm definitely going to check
one or two. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like just take one or two features, and even for games now, because we have mini games. So for mini games, it's the same logic. If you have a mobile game, you can in the future actually. It's not fully opened up yet because mini games are so new, but you'll be able to create, a lot of people will create a light version of their game, maybe the first few levels, and then use that as a tool to convert into people downloading the full app.
Yeah, I see tons of people playing games recently. I haven't gotten into it myself, but that definitely took off very quickly. Everyone's been playing those.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and again, that's I think there's definite opportunity for brands to explore that area as well, like building games to engage and delight users, and then convert that into other channels.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for brands, and there hopefully this year in 2018 we'll see more brands kind of doing it now that it seems a little bit more proven and people are starting to understand it a little bit better. I wanted to talk about something that personally I've been using a lot, is that, over last year, WeChat started to add in a lot more search options, which I think, and you can now see trending articles, and I think that's been really helpful for me to discover more brands, more official accounts. It just seems like WeChat is a little bit more open now. I can discover things more easily. And so I was just wondering if you might be able to speak a little bit about the search options. And do you think that WeChat's going to be adding more of this and opening up even more, making things easier to find on the platform? What are your kind of thoughts on that?
I think for search, definitely WeChat team has been putting more and more effort on search over the last year and a half. And the search experience in WeChat has been evolving rapidly and improving rapidly. Because search is something that's so basic. We all need to search for things and search for information. People on the desktop search, they go in China, they go to Baidu. It's instinctual. On the phone though, yes, Baidu is number one in search as well, but the position is much weaker than it is on the desktop. A lot of people, Chinese people spend about 1/3 of their time on the phone in WeChat, and so that's a lot of time. And most of that time is spent talking to people and in WeChat groups, but people, when they're talking to people, they need to search. And so doing that within WeChat actually makes a lot of sense. And WeChat traditionally has not really focused on the search experience, previously, but now they've realized, okay, we really need to put a lot more focus on this because we can actually eat a lot of Baidu's lunch with this, because if we can create a really good search experience, and we can do social search as well and actually create a better experience than on Baidu potentially, because WeChat has all this social data and it knows so much about you, they can tailor search results better, then this could be quite lucrative. Search is very monetizable for Tencent. Search ads is what Google and Baidu have built their entire empires on.
Yeah, and as I said, it's been for me, as someone who's always researching what's going on in China, it's made it so much easier now that they have these search functions. I've discovered so many new official accounts just because I'll search a topic, and then, now you can actually search within the articles, whereas before there really wasn't as much of that. And now I'm like, and I keep finding not that I have time to read all this content, but, I think the search function is something I'm really glad that they've added. Are you familiar with this kind of brand zone feature, as some people have been calling it? I don't know too much about it, and I don't quite understand it, but it seems like it's something that's very positive for brands. So could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, so Brand Zone was launched, I think, a couple of months ago now, and with I think it was 11 different brands. A lot of them in the luxury industry. And so for Brand Zone, if you search for a brand like Nike, for example, on WeChat search, then one of the top options, or maybe the top option that pops up in that search, will be for Nike's Brand Zone. And so this is a sort of a branded area that is customizable by the brand, and they can use it to display information about their brand or their products, or help you find a store, or do direct e-commerce through that brand zone area. So this is something that's actually the closest thing to this in China is Tmall, right? So Tmall, where you have a flagship Tmall store. So it's almost like WeChat is moving into this area of creating an alternative to a Tmall store.
Interesting. Okay. And so now you said originally they launched with, 11 or something brands. Have they opened that up is that something that other brands can, like, they have to apply to it, or how do brands get involved with that?
Yeah, I would say I haven't heard anything since that announcement. So that to me, that says it's still in a sort of like testing phase, which is very typical. WeChat will always nearly always do that. They will roll out features and functionality in stages. We see the same thing with mini programs. They'll test new features and functionality with one or two partners, or maybe a group of partners first, and then they'll open up to everyone later. And so why do they do that? Well, there's a lot of kinks and issues and small things that they want to optimize and make sure they've got everything worked out, because when they do open up something like this to everyone, they're going to be flooded with applications, and if there is an issue, it's going to could create potentially large problems. So I would expect it to open up, but it really depends on how the reception goes and whether they think it's worthwhile. But I would expect it to open up. I mean, I think it sounds like a great idea. And we know for sure that Tencent will do anything to take any kind of slice of the e-commerce pie these days. So anything that will help them in the battle against Alibaba, they're definitely going to do it.
Yeah, that seems to be ramping up a lot, that battle. Okay, yeah, because I as I said, I had heard about the feature, but then I feel like there hasn't been a lot of follow-up, or I haven't seen more, so that kind of explains it. So it's definitely something that I want to keep an eye on, because it just seems like it makes brands and their mini programs and e-commerce functions a lot more visible than they might have been before with just the normal search functions.
Yeah, exactly. So before, it's just coming at one stage, I guess. Before, if you were searching for a brand a couple of years ago on WeChat, then the only thing that would come up would be their official account, or maybe some articles that were written about them, and those articles could be from anyone. And the official account, you'd have to go in, you'd have to follow it. And then if you didn't want to get their information later on, you'd have to unfollow it later on. And so it's a very unnatural process, actually, when you think about it. And I think Alan Zhang, the WeChat founder, has mentioned this before when he's talked publicly about it. He feels that official accounts, service accounts, actually in many situations and scenarios are a little bit unnatural. So this makes a lot more sense. You search for the brand and it pops up and you've got the official information there right in front of you. And the same for mini programs. You search for something, a mini program pops up, you use it, and then you go away. You don't need to follow and unfollow anything.
Yeah, I definitely like that.
For marketers, for marketers, they hate it, right? Because marketers love service accounts because it's the same as email. Like, you follow a service account, that means you can spam someone once a week. So it's like joining an email list. So marketers always want that. But in terms of a user experience, it's not good.
Yeah, definitely. I think, from a user's perspective, it's nice because once you go and follow an official account, I know that I'm reluctant to go in and kind of unfollow them because it takes a couple of steps. And usually it's like I start to feel like it's really cluttered and I'm following too many accounts, and then I go in and kind of clean it out. But it's definitely like a bit of a process to do it. You have to, several clicks through, and so I definitely like that with mini programs and stuff that I don't have to follow them. I can still look at them.
And now it's time for this week's Parkloo Influencer Marketing Insights. Product seeding is probably one of the most used tactics in influencer marketing. The goal of most product seeding initiatives is to gain inexpensive publicity via the influencer talking about your product on their social media account. This tactic can work like a charm if executed properly, because influencers need stuff to talk about. However, if your product, and from what we've learned, packaging is not appealing to the influencer, they might not talk about your free gift at all. We interviewed 5 influencers to learn what motivates them to share. Number 1, product packaging is extremely important. Most influencers share images or videos on social, and if your packaging is not beautiful or unique, then it's really not share-worthy. Number 2, personalization is considered the number 1 motivator of share-worthy gifts. Embroidering, engraving, even complete customization almost guarantees your gift will be shared. To learn more about product seeding and tips from influencers, visit us at chinainfluencermarketing.com/parklu. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
So I want to ask you a question that I was thinking about after listening to recent podcast episode that you had with our friend Elijah Whaley from Park Lu, and that episode was really focused on kind of Weibo and some other platforms and how they're starting to monetize more. And I was, what you guys discussed was how they were monetizing on influencer campaigns, charging brands to work with influencers, and forcing them to kind of go through their platform. And I was wondering, do you think does WeChat do anything like this? And do you see them doing anything like this in the future? Because, it's very popular for brands to work with WeChat influencers. And from what I know, I don't think that WeChat is charging them anything. Am I wrong in this?
Basically not. There is one way that they have a matching platform where you can come in and find suitable, sort of a marketplace for advertisements, but the percentage they take is quite low, and you don't have to use it. But compared to Weibo, it's just night and day almost, especially with Weibo's new rules that we talked about on that podcast, and Eli gave us a sort of detailed description of how. How crazy it is, really. I can't believe that they did that. But on WeChat, they have a sort of philosophy about the platform. And actually, in a recent talk in Guangzhou, I remember Pony Ma, the CEO of Tencent, mentioned this. He said, "Well, actually for us, we have a sort of open platform philosophy. So you can come in and build." He described it as a house. You can build your house on our platform, and we don't take any rent. You don't need to worry about anyone coming. You don't need to worry about the rent rising. You don't need to worry about paying gas and electric, or us moving you out. It's completely open, and so you're not renting a counter in the supermarket. And the implication was, I think he was being asked that question in reference to the difference between Tencent and Alibaba. So he was drawing attention to the fact that if you go to, for example, Tmall, it's very expensive. Alibaba will raise those prices whenever they want. You're basically renting a counter. It's almost exactly like renting a counter space in a shopping mall, except it's online. But there's really, when you look at it from that sort of angle, it's almost exactly the same. Whereas on WeChat, you build your own following. Yes, it is a difficult platform to work with in many respects. It's not a natural marketing platform, but you can be confident once you build a following on WeChat that you will be able to reach that following whenever you want, within the rules, and you will not be charged. Right? So on Weibo, you've got to pay it's like Facebook. You build 1 million followers, but your organic reach is almost nothing. Whereas on WeChat, on a service account, you build 1 million followers, you send a message out, 1 million people get it. But having said that, it's not. I do need to caveat that with saying that a lot of people do find WeChat a difficult platform to work on, because although it is completely open and they do not charge, they are quite restrictive in what you can do to spam people or annoy users. So there's good and bad sides to it, but that's their philosophy right now, and that hasn't changed since the platform's opened up. There are questions now. People have been recently saying, well, WeChat, in terms of their user base, it's matured, and WeChat has 1 billion users now, 1 billion monthly active users, and that number's not growing very fast. It's almost come to a standstill, pretty much. Quarter-on-quarter growth is about 2% now. Which compared back to, a year ago, where it was, 10 times that. So it's really getting getting very mature, and they can't grow any more users anymore because WeChat outside China is not really, it can't compete with Facebook products, so they don't really have any chance to get any more users now. So once you're reaching all the users that you can reach, then the question comes: how do you increase average revenue per user? How do you increase ARPU? If you don't increase ARPU and you're not getting any more users, then you're basically not making any more money. And so the question is, how do they increase that ARPU in a way that doesn't annoy users, and also in a way that stays consistent with their values that they've had so far with not charging people. Now, the main way that I've been making money through WeChat up until now has been through the gaming center, actually, through download for games, because Tencent's the world's largest gaming company and they make an incredible amount of money on games. Most people don't realize that, but that's actually one of the main ways that WeChat helps Tencent make money. And then the other way is WeChat Pay, which along with Alipay is fast becoming, taking over all kinds of payments in China. And we all know that China's moving towards a cashless society, and that these two guys are the ones leading that. And for merchants, WeChat does take a percentage of payments. So I predict that in the future, that's the area they're pushing. And also we see that with mini programs. When we go back to mini programs, why are they pushing e-commerce so hard and mini programs so hard? Because it helps WeChat Pay, because people will buy more, and then Tencent can take a cut of that from merchants. So I think that's the way they would prefer to monetize, and we'll see if they can keep going in that direction in the future.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that you connect the fact that they're, where they get their money from. That makes a lot of sense with the mini programs and e-commerce. So I got that connection now. And yeah, I mean, I really, really hope that they can avoid starting to charge brands, from when they're working with influencers, because that's something that Weibo.
I don't think they will go down.
Yeah,
I think if anything, they might start. They'll start putting more native advertisements into the Moments newsfeed. That's very possible. A lot more than they do now. So going down the sort of Facebook route of putting. Facebook, if you go on, everyone, I can't believe the amount of ads they get away with putting on that newsfeed, because compared to WeChat, it's just so many. I think, WeChat's very conservative in that area.
Yeah, definitely. And I just, I hope that they do that, because I think it's very frustrating for influencers when you work so hard to build your audience, and then, platforms start making rules like these. And I mean, I guess it influences the brand more than the influencer when it comes to, charging extra to do sponsored campaigns. But in some ways it also affects the influencer, because then maybe brands will think twice about working with them, or they have to work with less influencers because they're having to pay these crazy fees to the platform instead.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody likes that. Completely agree.
Yeah. So I think that we often, I feel like a lot of people that listen to this podcast are also here, maybe in the US or Australia or Europe. They're brands that are considering entering the China market, or maybe they do cross-border, or they are like tourism boards, things like that. And so I was just wondering if you had any suggestions for stores, for entities outside of China who are wanting to use WeChat to, attract Chinese tourists, either to visit their destination or to, visit their store while they're abroad. Because I see a lot of, for example, tourism boards not doing too much. They have a very basic WeChat account, and they're sending out articles with pretty pictures about their location and stuff. And I feel like with all the new features, that there's a lot more that they could be doing to try and capture those travelers. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I know exactly what you mean. I remember clearly, I was doing a presentation in Beijing last year for one of the tourist boards, and when I checked out what they were doing, it's exactly what you described. WeChat recently has put forward an initiative called the City Experiences mini program, and the idea is it's meant to be for tourist boards to create almost an app for Chinese tourists. Again, I'm thinking of a mini program as a light app, where you can have embedded in that app all the information of all the sort of tourist sites, and you can have audio guides, and you can have maps, and you can have all the sort of later on you can have coupon and WeChat Pay in there as well. But tourist boards are uniquely placed to sort of collect all this information and present it and curate this information and create a sort of official space to do that. And WeChat is actually actively, I know the WeChat international marketing team, got a friend on that team who I was speaking to about this a couple of weeks ago. They're really pushing that quite hard and looking for partners and encouraging people to build those. And I was at the launch event for that a couple of months ago in Shanghai, and I think they started with London, Sydney, and Dubai, but there's a lot more of them open now. And I would definitely recommend any tourist board that's wanting to increase their presence on WeChat and to create something that can add a lot of value to the users and become a popular way to promote their destination, to look at that. And actually, I think if you're a popular destination for Chinese tourists, it should be quite easy to reach out to the WeChat team and talk with them about how you would build that together.
Yeah, so is that, I remember reading about that back when it came out, and I just want to clarify, so is that like, are those run by the City Experience accounts? Are those run by WeChat, or is that something that, like, is that a mini program that the destination builds on their own, or are these all kind of very a similar template for each city? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of people get confused by that. Actually, it's a completely open platform, and you can build as a tourist destination. You don't need to work with WeChat to build a mini program about and put all this information in. You can just find an agency to help you do that, and or if you have in-house capabilities, you could do it yourself as long as you had a Chinese entity. I think one of the key stepping stones would be the Chinese entity thing. So I do need to caveat all this by saying that many programs right now, as far as there might be some exceptions, but broadly, you can't, as an international organization, open a overseas mini program yet. It would have to be done under some Chinese entity. That might change at some point. It is possible to open an overseas service account, for example, and we've helped organizations do that. So that's definitely possible, but mini programs, because they're a bit newer and a little bit more sensitive, perhaps in terms of how WeChat perceives them, they're not so open. But that's pretty easy to get around. You just need to find a partner, and then you can build what you want, and you don't actually have to work with WeChat at all. In fact, WeChat, when they say a lot of when it's announced in the media, this company is working with WeChat to build this. Actually, many times it's not. So it's just they're building something on the WeChat platform. I'm trying to think. There was a recent example actually where it was. So they were talking about the ID card systems for WeChat. So or for the legal WeChat mini programs, where law courts in China, you can actually through a WeChat mini program, you can submit evidence during a hearing in a law court in China. This is now possible.
That's crazy.
Both submitting evidence legally is possible through WeChat, through some local government mini programs, and then also having a legally valid form of ID card through a WeChat mini program is also possible in certain parts of China. But both of these systems, when they're announced in the media and globally, they get a lot of attention. It's like, oh, you've got this WeChat ID card now. You've got this WeChat, you can sue people through WeChat. Yeah, it's true, but it's not, because it's a completely open platform. It's not like actually the cooperation between them and Tencent is a lot lighter than most people realize. They might consult with them. In fact, they definitely consult with them. But in terms of the data and the thing, it's just like building an app almost. If you built an app for Android, does that mean you're cooperating with Google? Kind of, I guess, but not really. You wouldn't say that I built an app for Android. That means I'm cooperating with Google now. But in terms of PR, sometimes people confuse that and they think, that I need to work with WeChat in order to build something, or these guys have worked directly with WeChat team to build something, when actually they might have had one meeting and then said, okay, we got the idea, you go and build it and we'll help you announce it. And that's all the cooperation is.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so maybe for some of these like city experiences or tourism board mini programs, things like that, it's more of that kind of case, more of that situation.
Yeah, exactly. For the ones that, it depends. Now, I want to caveat that again by saying that sometimes it's not that. Sometimes there are like very deep corporations, but it's more often than not, it's just that they're building something for WeChat and then it gets announced that they're cooperating with Tencent when in fact they just had one meeting.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. I got it a little bit more. Well, I want to just quickly go back to something that we were talking about previously, because I just thought of it, was just that you were mentioning a little while ago that it's getting a little bit harder to achieve growth on WeChat just because it's becoming a little bit more mature. So do you have any, I guess, kind of suggestions for influencers who are still trying to grow their accounts on WeChat? Is there anything that you can see that they can do to help? Because I've heard that people are finding it difficult to grow these days. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, for sure. I think it's probably very difficult to grow these days. WeChat's very mature. And Weibo as well. Weibo's very mature. If you're starting out, if you're young and you want to, if you're in the early days of building yourself as an influencer or even as a brand now coming into China fresh, don't start on those platforms. You might want to have a presence on them both. In fact, you definitely want to have a presence on them both. For most people, it's a must. You have to have some kind of entity on there. But expecting to get rapid growth on those platforms right now as 2018 is unrealistic unless you've got a very special product or unless you've got massive offline presence. So you can drive a lot of traffic from stores across China where people are scanning your QR codes offline. That's possible. Or unless you've integrated it somehow into the process of your sign up or into the actual service that you're offering, which could be possible, if you're in a service company, for example. But if you're expecting rapid growth as an influencer right now, you'd probably be on a platform like Douyin, that's exploding and is very young and vibrant, and it's still fairly early days, I think, for them. And there's a lot more opportunity. Similarly, if you're a brand, you might look at some more sort of niche platforms that are specific to the people you're trying to target. There's a lot more targeted advertisement options on those platforms. You'll be able to reach your people much better there than you will be on a huge platform like WeChat, where they don't care about you at all because it's WeChat. Why would they care? Same thing for Weibo. But having said that, if you want to be on WeChat and you have to be on WeChat. So how are you going to grow your fans on WeChat? The best practices that haven't changed too much. The big change in the last year has been mini programs, and we've talked about that quite a bit already. If you are a influencer and you've got a subscription account and you're trying to convert into anything, then a mini program is built for conversion. That's what they're about. They're not about retention, they're about conversion. Fast, easy conversion. whether that's e-commerce or whether that's sign up for something else, whatever it is, or to get them to, watch your content. And it's also for building, beautiful, completely tailored app-like experiences if you want to do that.
Yeah, that definitely. I think that it sounds like mini programs are becoming more accessible, even for smaller influencers, and it might be a good way to possibly distinguish themselves and add more features and types of content than maybe their WeChat account would usually allow for. So it's definitely something I think influencers, other than just the top ones, should possibly consider.
Yeah, definitely. The actual core, experience of WeChat is not that suited to many influencers. It's not very video friendly. It's all mostly about articles and mostly about text. And when you do put video in there, it's a small video. Unless you want to, tap to make it full screen, you have to tap twice. You have to tap once to get it out there and another one to make it full screen. It's not a very natural. Like I just mentioned Douyin, for example, right? In Douyin, you've got a stream and then it's full screen already. And it's a very immersive video experience. So a lot of video influencers now, because video is getting so much more important in the last few years. It's definitely a trend. WeChat's traditionally been a little bit difficult for that, but a mini program gives you complete freedom to build something that could be very friendly for video if you want it to be. There's one thing I think we forgot to mention, which is WeChat. WeChat groups, right? So, actually, I'm not so. WeChat groups are so hidden. You can follow an official account and you can know what this brand's doing, or you can know what this influencer is doing. But with WeChat groups, it's a very closed environment. But WeChat groups can also be very, very powerful, and I think we shouldn't forget about those. WeChat is the default communication tool in China. So if you want to, either as a brand or as an influencer, get the people who love you the most, your brand advocates or your closest followers, and get those guys together in a WeChat group, that can be incredibly powerful for, incentivizing them to promote whatever you want them to promote, or communicate with them and understand what they're thinking about your content, or understand with how they perceive you as an influencer or as a brand.
I completely agree. I've seen a lot of influencers using WeChat groups similarly to, here in the US, there's a lot of people who will have Facebook groups, special members only Facebook groups and things like that. And it's essentially the same thing. I see a lot of influencers creating these WeChat groups for their followers, and then, like you said, getting a lot of feedback and a better understanding of their followers, and it's an easier way for them to, make announcements or communicate to a lot of them at once, especially when, like we were saying before, that Weibo and some of these other platforms are kind of throttling people's organic reach. So it's a great way to maintain that connection with their followers.
Definitely. It makes me think, I spend a lot of time in Shenzhen and in co-working spaces there, where our team works out of, and sometimes I overhear conversations when we're in the open area of other Chinese startups. Because Shenzhen's just such a tech-orientated city, and they always, when they're talking about the sort of followers that they have, the reach that they have, a lot of these startups, one of the first things out of their mouths is like, "Oh, we have like 5,000 WeChat groups, with X number of WAN of followers in there." So it's definitely a technique that startups use in China to actually gain traction and get their initial following and to sell or convert into some ways. So that's always a great sign, because if startups are doing it, that means it works, and B, it's low cost.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I personally learned a lot about WeChat as well. I think sometimes I tend to focus a lot on some of those other platforms because WeChat is a beast unto itself, and there's always so many changes going on. It's hard to keep up with all of them. So I think you definitely shared some valuable information about all the changes that are going on with WeChat these days, and how brands and influencers can be, staying on top of those. And so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Oh, sure. I think they can find me on Twitter. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can find me on. We also have the podcast, as I mentioned before, China Tech Talk. If they want to have a listen to that, they can find us on WeChat, on the official account as well, and the website as well. I think ChinaChannel.co.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Lauren. A pleasure as always. Great speaking to you.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Matt. You can find links to all of his websites and social media channels in the show description or in the show notes on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com. I'd love to hear what you thought of the episode. You can leave me a comment also on ChinaInfluencerMarketing.com or message me on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode and know somebody else who might like it too, don't forget to share. Thanks. Talk to you next week.